Welcome to our Sound for Video help session. Today is the 29th of January, 2015, and we are going to talk a little bit about mostly audio workflow, but we'll also obviously put in some editing workflow because it all kind of ties together in a lot of ways. So we'll cover that. First of all, however, we do have a question from one of our friends, and let's just, let me pull that up first. And the question was essentially, hey, I have a friend who's doing kind of, often it's called man on the street. This happens to be a woman. So she's doing, I guess, woman on the street interviews. So she's kind of just walking up to people, talking with them, and doesn't have the kind of, I guess, the luxury of necessarily having a boom operator. So the question was, what can you recommend in terms of microphones and specifically lavalier microphones? And of course, the request was also cheap lavalier microphones. So that's usually often go together. So let me just throw out some thoughts there. It's a tough one to answer because there are so many things that I don't know about this particular person and what she's doing in her production, what her engineer has access to, so on and so forth. So if my first I guess recommendation is it probably would be helpful to understand if you're going to be recording, if it's a requirement to record the audio to the camera, and if so, what kind of camera. So that's the first thing. Also, how much are the talent going to be moving around? And that'll make a difference. If you need to be tethered to a camera and the talent are moving, that's a tough one to do. I wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend finding another way to do that. And that may involve syncing in post your audio. So I don't know, there are just a lot of factors. So I'm going to do my best here to answer the question here. And actually, let me pull it up just to make sure I get it all just right. And we're going over to the Google Plus page. While I'm doing that, and I think we're almost there. Yeah, here we are. Okay. So the question was from Bernie Amc, I think. I apologize if I don't see your name right there, Bernie. But he says, now this is the way it is. She wants to buy everything that an engineer will need to have a good recording at the most affordable rate available. She wants to own the tools, then employ any available engineer wherever she wants to work. So let's just assume she has nothing to work with now. What can you recommend for her? So I will say, and let me just share my screen here real quick. We'll look at a couple of things here. I'll just share my entire screen. All right. Some time ago, last summer, I did a review of a Countryman B6. That is not a cheap microphone, but it is a very solid microphone. So that's going to be about just shy of $300 US. And let me just pull up my channel here. I'll show you, and I can put a link for this down below, but if you just go to my channel, you'll see it. This particular review, what we did was we actually recorded with the Countryman B6 into a Zoom H1. So if we do a search here it is right here. Countryman B6 lavalier microphone review. So I would, definitely recommend you go take a look at that. Well, there's an ad first, but this is a really solid combination, the Zoom H1 and the Countryman B6. The Countryman B6 is very much a professional tool. It is very well built. It is extraordinarily small, so it's easy to hide if you do need to hide it, say, for example, under shirt, in hair, wherever you need to hide it, maybe under a collar. So those are some options to consider. You can buy it with a variety of different connectors. So I purchased, or I didn't purchase it. That one was on loan from B&H Photo, and I got the version with the 3.5 millimeter plug with a Sennheiser locking connector. So that'll work into a Zoom H1, no problem. And I don't know, go see for yourself if that works. I guess, check to see if that fits within your budget. I don't know what your budget was. It didn't really provide that information, but I think that would be a really solid combination. The Zoom H1 is surprisingly good in terms of audio quality. However, it is not the most robust build quality. So that's something to keep in mind. So I don't know, that would be something she'd have to put in her pocket and then sync up to the camera later. If she won't be moving around a lot and wants to be tethered to the camera, there are some other options out there those are usually going to be consumer grade microphones. So for example, Audio-Technica ATR 3350 IS can do that. The Aperture ALAV can do that. Those have really long cables. Usually they're like 5 or 6 meters long. So it gives you a little room between the camera and the talent. Anything else is going to have a much shorter cable and be a little bit more difficult to work with if you're tethered to the camera. So anyway, that, Bernie, I think is my recommendation. I would suggest you go take a look at that and see how that fits, both in terms of her budget and what she's trying to accomplish. So a couple options for you there. All right, let's talk about workflow. And in fact, let me just come back here for a minute. I want to, first of all, kind of walk through the particular workflow that I use. And I have to caveat that very heavily. Workflows are very individual. They depend on if you're working in a project with a lot of other people or if you're working on your own. If you're working on your own, you have a lot more latitude to do pretty much whatever you want. But there's no, I would say there's no such thing as a right workflow and a wrong workflow if you're working on your own. So today, let's start off by just talking a little bit about if you are working on your own. Let me just show you what I do personally. And this will, of course, vary from person to person greatly. I'm not suggesting this is the right workflow or the one that you should use. I'm just suggesting this is what I do presently. And I'm learning new stuff all the time, so this may evolve over time. If you're working on a production where you have various teams that work on the different pieces, so for example, if you recorded the sound for a piece and then you hand that off to the post-production crew, then the workflow is very different. And we can talk about that as well. Hopefully we'll have enough time to cover both of those in general terms at least. What I'm going to do is probably talk a little bit more first about my workflow, and then we'll see how much time we have left. And if we need to, we can follow up on a future session about, again, larger production workflows as well. So let me share my screen here again and show you some things that I currently do. Okay. So here, a while back, I did a little piece over on YouTube called, there was a little review of the Rode Video Mic Me. And this is just a little consumer grade mic that you hook up to your phone. It's made specifically for iPhone. But what I do is, first of all, as far as workflow, once I'm, actually, let me make another caveat before I go any farther, because I think this is very important. Most of the pieces that I'm editing, both for YouTube and for my corporate videos, are short pieces. And for example, on the corporate pieces, I will typically record, the end product will probably be between 2.5 to 5 minutes. So they're extraordinarily short. And usually what I'll do is after the shoot, I'll come back with probably anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes of footage and 15 to 25 minutes worth of audio as well. So it's not an overwhelming amount. I can usually pretty quickly handle that. And what I do is that when I come back, I download all of the footage and the audio into a couple of different folders. So I make a project folder. I put audio, a footage, a raw footage folder. This temp is actually just because I already worked on this project, so I moved everything there that I've already done because I wanted to show you what I do here. So I just dump them all in here. And then what I do as I walk through each of the clips one by one, and we give them new names. So here, that's going to be, for example, 01 car phone mic. Because I happen to know in that particular case, that was when I was recording in the car, I was demonstrating the phone mic. Let's move on to the next one. And here's the same thing. This is going to be 02 car Rode. So I was using the Rode mic in that one. Here's some more footage. There's just sort of the 03 product overview. Let's see. Yes. Okay. 04. I happen to know that this is outdoor phone mic. And then finally, outdoor with the Rode mic. So 05 outdoor Rode mic. Okay, so once I've done that, I do the same thing for the audio. In this case, because I was because I was instead actually demonstrating audio and video captured by the phone, the audio and video are already synced together and they're in the same file. However, usually I do some post-processing, as you know. Now, sometimes when I'm doing mic reviews, obviously I don't want to do a lot of post-processing, but a lot of times I will do some post-processing in most of my other pieces, and certainly in my corporate pieces I will. So over here in Adobe Audition, what I would do, actually, before I go on to there, one other thought here. Sorry for the chaos. Here is where I also do my picks. If I know I'm not going to use one of these clips, like this product overview didn't actually turn out that well, and I'm going to either reshoot that or, you know, I've got a better clip, I might actually just do something like this, or I might actually, you know, just give it a name like that so it's out of order, or I might actually have another folder in here where I call it the rejected footage. And I might just drop this quickly in there because I know I'm probably not going to use it. I've still got it there if I need it, but if I know I'm not likely to use it, I can do my picks that way. So again, this doesn't necessarily work if you've got a lot of clips and you're doing a longer piece. But again, for short pieces, this often will work out well because again, a lot of times, even from the corporate pieces, I'll come back with maybe 10 or 15 at the most different clips. And so it's pretty easy to put that together. Sometimes if I have a bigger project, I may come back with 25 or 30 clips if I have to do a couple different camera angles or, you know, whatever the case may be. So I usually do my picks that way. And then I would do the same thing with the raw audio. In this particular case, I don't have any raw audio because again, they're integrated with the video here because of this particular type of piece I was doing. Then what I would do is actually come over into Adobe Audition. And this is where my workflow is actually pretty peculiar. Most of the times on a big production, when you have multiple teams, you might have somebody that, in terms of audio, what will often happen is that the sound mixer will hand off the audio files to either the DIT or whoever else is responsible for gathering everything up and kind of consolidating it. And in that case, a lot of times, if you have a proper sound mix, so that file will include a stereo mix down of all of the microphones that were captured, plus isolated tracks or individual tracks for each of the microphones that were captured as well. So what happens then on these larger productions, oftentimes they'll create dailies, and a daily is just sort of a quick look at all of the clips that were gathered for the previous day, maybe a very rough edit, but typically not even a rough edit, just the clips. They will take the stereo mix from the audio files and combine that with the video files, and that's what they'll show the next day to the director, the daily review. So that's a lot of times why a stereo mix is helpful if you have that option in your recorder. In this case, I'm not doing that. What I'm doing is I'm just going to go ahead and open up these files here. Let me get to my stuff. Let's go to movies, Rode video mic. I've got my raw footage. And I know, for example, let's just work with one of these files here. This is going to be the outdoor Rode mic. I'll open that. And I can open that right here in Adobe Audition. So I just get the audio file. So then what I do here is I would just process this audio file here. Now, to be honest, because I have it at my disposal, and I realize not everybody has this, but typically I'm going to do most of my processing in Isotope RX. So let me just quickly, I'm going to just kind of run through this really quickly. I would do channel ops here first, and I will come back and talk about some of this stuff in more detail in a future episode. I'm going to do that. This one actually is looking a little bit noisy. So if I weren't doing a microphone review here, I would actually clean that up. And the way I would do that is I would come in here to my denoise. This has a fantastic dialogue denoiser. Auto almost always does a fantastic job. I pull the reduction down to something pretty lightweight. I can't actually play the audio for you here over Google Hangouts, but I can go ahead and listen to it a little bit myself. Okay, and I go ahead and process that. Now you'll notice after the dialogue denoising happens, it actually didn't do too much. I think we're going to be okay. I'm going to come in and look at my loudness here, see where we're at. We're at minus 31. I want this as a mono file. I want to get this to minus 19.5. So we've got a fair bit of work to do. I might first go to minus 24 just so I can kind of see what things are looking like visually. Again, don't get too hung up in the details here. We've covered this in the past and we'll cover it more in the future. Okay, so now we're at minus 24. That's good. To get to minus 19, I'm going to have to do some compression here. I've actually started doing, I don't have it on this one, but I actually have been using the multi-band compressor lately. But let's just for the sake of being fairly quick about this. Let's see, I'm at minus 24, and I need to buy myself about 5.5, 6 dB of headroom to get up to minus 19, minus 19.5. I'm going to go to, let's compress down to, let's start with minus 12 here as our threshold. Got a ratio of 3:1. Attack time is 0 milliseconds. Release fast, soft knee process. Okay, that's good. Let's get back into our loudness, see where we're at now. We're at minus 27 with a headroom of minus 9.1 for peak, so we can actually get to minus 19.5 without backing off any of the peaks there. Process that. Okay, and there we go. We'll go ahead and send that back to Audition. Come into Audition and pull it back in here. This is how the the round tripping works. Is not the most elegant, but it's not bad. Go ahead and apply that. Okay, so this amplitude statistics, we run that. We should be sitting at minus 19.6. That's good. I actually, now this is not something you necessarily have to do, and I'm not necessarily advocating this with, but Final Cut Pro 10 was doing some funny things with mono dialogue files. And so what I would do is I would always convert this into stereo here, so that Final Cut Pro 10 knows what to do with it. It's not an issue in my experience with Premiere, but for whatever reason, Final Cut Pro kind of trips on that. So we close that, open up amplitude statistics. Now we have 2 channels. I can scan the whole thing. Our true peak is minus 1.5, which is what I usually aim for, and our overall loudness is minus 16.591 for in stereo. So there we go. So I would save that. And we've got a 48 kilohertz, 32-bit. Good. I'm going to save it where I need to go. Oh, yeah, I have to open this up. Here we go. So now I'm going to put that in the audio folder. The reason I put the processed audio and the processed footage in a different folder than the raw audio, the raw footage, is that I have had some apps kind of get confused. If the file names start, say they have the first same 10 characters, like for example, if I saved this, the original file would have been called outdoor road mic, or 05 outdoor road mic, and then I would just say maybe mastered to indicate that, hey, this is the one that I've already processed or whatever. Some of the apps actually tripped on that. I've seen Final Cut Pro 10 has tripped on it, and Adobe Premiere has tripped on it before too. So I put them in separate files. That way it doesn't seem to have that issue. So we'll put that in the audio file, click save, and okay, good. We're good there. Okay, now I can close RX. I'm done with that. All right, now if I were going to do any sort of color grading, again, only for short pieces, this is totally backwards of what would happen on any piece that was done by a larger production. I would actually go do that color grading right now. So I would just go ahead and open DaVinci Resolve, or you could use whatever app of your choice you like. But I do most of mine in DaVinci Resolve. Some of it I actually do in Final Cut Pro 10 with a plugin called Color Finale, but again, totally up to you. If I'm doing it in Final Cut Pro 10, I don't do it now. I do it after the edit. If I'm doing it beforehand, because I needed to get in and do something a little bit more complex that Color Finale can't really handle, I would do it here in DaVinci Resolve first, and then I would save the new files that I created in DaVinci Resolve into the footage folder, and then I would start my edit from there. So I'm actually not going to get into the details here of DaVinci Resolve right now, but just so you're aware, that's typically how I would approach that. Okay, so then it's time to start our edit. So let's come over here into Premiere. Now, there are lots of other ways you can do this. To be honest, I typically these days, I do still edit from time to time in Premiere, but most of my editing these days is actually done in Final Cut Pro 10. I think they're both great apps. I'm not suggesting that one is better than the other or one is worse than the other. They each have their strengths and weaknesses, but I have actually been doing most of mine in Final Cut Pro 10, so I don't have the capability from Final Cut Pro 10 to do the round trip that you would necessarily do in Premiere with Adobe Audition. So if you were using Adobe Audition, you could do that a little bit easier, and you wouldn't have to necessarily do what I just did there. So, all right, so let's come into our audio folder. We're gonna want to pull that in because that's the audio file we just edited. And then, oh, this is change in this version of OS 10 has been driving me a little crazy here. I got to go back up here and come into the footage. Actually, they're down in the raw footage. So let's say this is the corresponding video track here. I just happen to know, but I would bring all of them in. And then this is just a matter of highlighting those, right click, merge clips. We can actually use the audio tracks, and we can remove audio from the AV clip and click OK. And that should line them right back up. Go ahead and drop this down here to create a new sequence. And there we are. Yep, you can't hear it on your end, I realize, but yeah, so that is, and then I would come in here and I could just do my edit, however I wanted to do that. This is interesting here. I just realized that it doesn't actually connect those. So I would actually link those together so that when I'm doing my edit, they edit together. And interestingly, it looks like it actually put those on two separate audio tracks. So things have changed in Premiere since I was using it regularly as well. That was actually, I think, unless I've forgotten, that used to be a stereo track instead of two individual mono tracks. In any case, it works fine either way. So then I would do my edit and I would be on my way. So that's a very simple, frankly, it's kind of a backwards way of doing things, but it seems to work decently for where I'm the only guy involved in the project. That works okay. And the reason that on bigger productions, they do it differently than this, they actually do all the editing first, and then what they do is they send an OMF file to the audio team. So the editors will do their job first. They'll actually sync up. In many cases, what they'll do is they'll actually just sync up the stereo mix for audio because they don't want to have to mess with, maybe 18 different channels or 18 different mics that were capturing the sound or however many it was. But they'll just get the stereo mix, attach that to the video clips, do their edit, and then once they've got their edit, in theory, at picture lock, that is to say they're done editing, then they'll create this OMF file, which they'll send over to the sound team. And if we do that really quick here, actually, let's come back to that. I want to give you a better example of that with an actual edit that makes sense, where we've actually got lots of clips cut together, just so you can see what that looks like once we bring it into Adobe Audition and open it up in the multi-track view. So we'll come back and visit that one in a little bit more detail. But there are some considerations. So again, this is the one-man band workflow that I use. Lots of other people do other ways, obviously. So if, for example, we had there's the original video file here. If I brought that down here, I could actually just bring that in here and do my edit. And then I could actually send it over to Adobe Audition. So I can edit this clip in Adobe Audition. Open it up there and do my processing. Once I'm done, I just save it and it brings it back into Premiere Pro and you're all set to go. So that can simplify things greatly. That's kind of one of the big value propositions that Adobe brings to the table as far as the integration of their different applications. So that's definitely something you can do as well. Other things that I wanted to cover today here. Again, just consider this sort of an introduction. This is one way you can do it. If you've got something that's working better for you, that is working really fine, I would definitely consider it. There's another weakness with the way I'm doing it that probably means I need to be exploring other options as well. And that is that if you do your loudness normalization, and we've talked about loudness normalization several times in the past, if you do that on individual clips, things can start to get funky. And while two individual clips may both be loudness normalized to minus, say, 16 LUFS, they actually could be slightly different. If one of them, for example, has a lot of silent sections in it versus the other, they can actually sound a little bit different, even though technically they're being both normalized to the same LUFS level. So ideally, what should happen is the edit really should take place first, and then all of the dialogue should be loudness normalized. And actually, the entire program, which includes the music, the effects, anything else that is involved in the sound for that picture, you should loudness normalize that all together. And that's a much more advanced thing that we will probably take a look at in the future at some point. So that's another consideration there. All right, let's just check in here and see how we're doing with our friends. Looks like I'm not sharing the screen anymore. I don't know why it turned itself off. I apologize for that. I don't know how far back that happened, so hopefully we got everything we needed still as far as the screen share part was concerned. Let's see if we've got any questions in the queue here. Looks like none there. Anything in the chat? Nothing in the chat. I think we're all good on that front as well. All right. Let's talk for just a couple of minutes about upcoming items. Let's see. I guess it was last week we had a review of the Saramonic V mic, which is a relatively affordable camera top shotgun microphone. Again, those are useful in a few circumstances. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend those as kind of a general purpose microphone, but they are generally better than what you're going to have in your camera if you're operating with a consumer or prosumer grade camera. Actually, even better than most pro cameras. So I think it does have its use cases, and I think you can, if you're getting started, you're doing talking head video, you can actually get it off the camera. It kind of takes some fiddling around, and you got to find the right way to mount it onto a boom pole and make that work. But you can get an extension cable, and actually I was getting surprisingly good audio quality that way. So there's a little something for you. I guess the appeal really of that microphone is that it runs about $130 US, if I recall. Runs on 2 AA batteries. So if that's in your budget range and you're looking for your first boom mic or shotgun mic that you can mount on your camera, there's an option there. It's definitely less expensive than the Rode VideoMic Pro, and about half the price. But what I haven't tested extensively yet is I suspect, but I haven't tested it yet, so I don't know. But I suspect that the suspension system, the little kind of the lyre system on the Rode VideoMic, the newer version, probably isolates a lot of the camera movement. So as you're moving the camera around, if the mic is mounted up on top, you'll pick up a lot of noise. And that's just from the microphone transferring noise from the camera, just handling noise of the camera to the microphone. And so that lyre system does a really nice job, I found. The Saramonic has a similar type thing, although it seems quite a bit stiffer, and I'm not sure it's quite as good at isolating that sound. So there are some costs, I think, and we'll see for sure when I do a little bit more testing with that, if that is in fact the case, or if the Saramonic holds up just as well. Obviously, there are also other accessories you can get with the Rode VideoMic that you can't with the Saramonic, at least not from Saramonic itself. For example, Rode offers a kind of they call it a dead cat wind cover, so the big furry covers that actually fits the Rode VideoMic. So there's that option. And then also the Rode VideoMic has a 3/8 inch tap on the bottom of the cold shoe, which means you can actually attach it to a proper boom pole. So as in a handheld production audio boom pole. So that gives you a little bit more, I guess, more value if you are going to kind of move up as far as your gear is concerned at some point. So there are differences. Is it worth is the Rode VideoMic Pro worth the additional $120 or whatever to you? That's only something you can decide. But if you've only got $130, that's one worth looking at. All right. I think that's everything that we wanted to cover in today's session. Again, if you've got any questions that you run into based on what we talked about today, definitely put those down below. I realize it's hard in 30 minutes to go in a lot of depth into workflows, but that I just wanted to kind of get that one out there first, and we'll start talking about this a little bit more detail if this is something that's of interest to you. And we can also talk more about larger production workflows if that's of interest to you as well. So again, thanks for checking out this session, and we will talk to you again soon.